You know, I read just recently declassified information, the CIA's own website, where they admit that the US government was deeply involved in the overthrow or assassination of Prime Minister Mossadegh of Iran, President Allende of Chile, Arbenz of Guatemala, Diem of Vietnam, Lumumba of the Congo. And speaking of Allende of Chile, he was replaced by the terribly brutal dictator General Pinochet, who was a great defender of Operation Condor and also oversaw the murder of tens of thousands of his people, and was praised by Secretary of State Henry Kissinger as a great defender of capitalism. I stood in front of the Shah of Iran, the presidents of Indonesia, Ecuador, Panama, members of the Royal House of Saudi Arabia, and I've said something like, in this hand, I have millions of dollars for you and your friends if you play our game. In this hand, I have a gun in case you decide not to. Now, my words were more diplomatic than that, but that was the message. I was an economic hitman. And we economic hitmen have created a new global economy, really, a form of capitalism that I call predatory capitalism. I would go to countries with resources our corporations covet, like oil. I'd arrange a huge loan to those countries from the World Bank or its sister organizations, but the money wouldn't actually go to the country. It would go to our corporations, Bechtel, Halliburton, Brown and Root, familiar names, to build big infrastructure projects in those countries and incidentally make huge profits in the process. They'd build power plants and industrial parks, things that would benefit a few wealthy families in the country, the ones that own the industries. But the majority of the people would suffer. They would be left holding a huge debt they couldn't repay. So we'd go back and say, since you can't pay your debt, sell your resource, oil or whatever, real cheap to our corporations. Privatize. Sell your utilities, your schools, your jails, everything like that to our corporations. And Claudine also told me that if the leaders of these countries refused my offer, people she called jackals would be right behind me. I didn't actually carry a gun, but the jackals did. My first assignment was in Indonesia, a country that had just ended a terrible civil war where more than 1 million people had been killed. It had a terrifying reputation. And I have to admit that when I arrived in Jakarta, knowing I'd be there for about 3 years, my knees were shaking pretty bad. My stomach was filled with fluttering butterflies. I had no idea what I was supposed to do. I was a very young man. I just knew that I was expected to produce a report that would convince the Indonesian government to build an extremely expensive electrical system, hiring our corporations to do it. Claudine had made it sound simple, even kind of James Bondishly romantic. But now I'm struck by reality, and I felt naive, ill-prepared, vulnerable. Fortunately for me, the winner of the Civil War, President Suharto, who was actually a dictator, wanted the projects that I was offering. And he also wanted CIA and Pentagon protection. And so every time I stumbled, and I stumbled often, somebody was there to pick me up. A government official would appear with an incredible report that would indicate beyond any shadow of a doubt that electricity was all the country needed to take off to huge growth. A Harvard-trained mathematician showed up with a mathematical formula that proved that if they just built this electrical system, everything would be fine. In the end, I produced a report that forecast the need for electricity at an unheard of annual rate of 19%. Indonesia got its loan. Our corporations made lots of money, and I was promoted from economist to chief economist. It was quite a lesson. At that time, the Cold War was just really, really revving up. And Washington believed that Cuba was about to spread communism throughout the hemisphere. The CIA developed a program called Operation Condor to support right-wing dictatorships in Brazil, Argentina, Chile, throughout the continent. Jaime Roldos, president of Ecuador, democratically elected, and Omar Torrijos, head of state of Panama, strongly opposed Operation Condor. I was sent down to get them to change their ways. They wouldn't. They refused. Roldos was killed when his private plane crashed in what many believe was not an accident. Torrijos said, if CIA killed my friend Jaime, I'll probably be next. In less than 3 months, he died when his private plane crashed under very similar circumstances. You're going to hear after me, after the break, from a Marine Corps general who was in Panama at the time, and he agrees with me that these were probably, at least Torrijos was probably assassination.